A warm good afternoon. It's a privilege to be back again at IDSA because I had the opportunity of actually speaking at the first seminar that happened last year. Thanks to Pradeep ji for making this happen. Uh, when the whole thought came about speaking again on Arthasastra, was trying to relook. Therefore, the topic also starts with relooking at Arthashastra. Interestingly, when I look back at my own life, I've been in the field of learning and teaching Arthashastra for the last 10 years now. So for me, it was a great academic research that went on to even create an institution at the Mumbai University, where we train students on the complete 6,000 sutras of Arthashastra. They had an opportunity actually to come to IDSA, interact with some of them. And it was quite interesting that actually our institution, that's the Chanakya Institute of Public Leadership, has actually become a case study on creating good leaders for the next generation. Just a couple of weeks back, we had Euro News, a channel from Europe actually coming down to India, and they identified unique leadership schools of the world. And we happen to be one in India and among the top 3. I'm here not to speak on our institution because actually that was my subject last year. So, but I would like to tell you that of course, we have tried to look at the Kautliyan model being really applied in an academic institution and also, experimenting whether it really works in the world after students pass out. My head of department, Dr. Shubhada Joshi, would speak a little bit more about that in her next session, but I will limit myself in the given 10 minutes to something which I've been thinking about beyond Arthashastra. So we will start with the base of Arthashastra, but then I'm looking at various powers used in military strategy in Arthashastra. So let me start with the basic. How does Arthashastra actually look at military strategies? We have got a lot of experts, all of you from the military angle looking at it. So I don't want to add to the already existing Gyan or the Gyan that's going to come in the afternoon as well. I'm going to actually look upon Arthashastra saying that, okay, we have understood, we are developing a lot of curriculum, material, etc. But can we look beyond and look at a bigger dimension of Arthashastra? So let's go back to the basic text. What does Arthashastra talk about? Powers. One of the definitions of Artha itself is power. So when we say Artha is political science, some people say Artha is about wealth. But one definition which I read, I think it was Ganpati Shastriji, he said Arthashastra is Shastra on power. Artha itself has power. Wow, good dimension. And today we talk about, soft power and military power and economic power. But Arthashastra primarily talks about 3 powers, which is there right from the reference given by R.P. Kangle, a very profound scholar who translated Arthashastra into English. The Shastra refers to 3 Shaktis or powers that operate in a state. They are Utsaha Shakti, that is the personal energy and the drive of the ruler himself. Second is Prabhava Shakti, the power of the army and the treasury, and Mithra Shakti, the power of counsel and diplomacy. So this has been defined, and even Aditya mentioned in his particular session about this particular pass. But as I told you, I'm going to go a little bit more beyond. I find a lot of dimensions of powers coming. So apart from these 3, I'm going to actually talk about some more dimensions which probably makes the king more powerful or the state the most powerful state in that particular era, let's say. So let me start with my definitions and understanding of power. So as it's completely disclaimer, so I don't want to make it only where is the reference given. So this is the reference, of course, with the 3 powers, but I'm going beyond it. So the types of power, according to me, my understanding is there are more than 6, but I'm limiting it to 6. The first power is Anvikshiki, the power of thinking. The second is, of course, Utsaha Shakti, which has been described. Prabhava Shakti, again, which has been described. Third is Mithra Shakti, again, which has been described. But I also talk about another very important power, that is Mithra Shakti, the power of allies. And finally, Guru Shakti, the power of a spiritual teacher. So let me try and define each of them in the next few minutes that I have. One arrow may or may not kill the enemy, but a man using a sharpened intellect can destroy the king along with his whole kingdom. Now that's Anvikshiki. Arthashastra starts with the first sutra saying, Anvikshiki Trayi Varta Danda Nitis Cheti Vidya. The opening sutra, and when you really meditate on that, not just read it. In our Shastras we say there is one thing called as Abhyasa and there is something called as Dhyana. Now what is Dhyana? Of course, we can say there are a lot of definitions of Dhyana, but knowledge according to our ancient tradition is not just what you repeat, which is Abhyas, and you kanthastha, but it is also an understanding about it. So students are generally given one mantra and say, uske upar japa karo. Japa is not how many thousand times you do it, but every time you repeat, you actually put your mind into it and start understanding it. So when I started looking at saying that why Chanakya is talking about in the education of a king, the 4 important knowledge, Anvikshiki, Trayi, Varta and Dandaniti. Anvikshiki is the first one, which is the science of thinking. Kangleji itself said Anvikshiki as philosophy. So, a king should have a philosophical base, then Trayi, which is the whole Vedas, etc., etc., and then we have Varta, which is understanding economics, and finally Dandaniti. I'm not going to talk about the other thing, but I want to focus on Anvikshiki. Today we call it knowledge power, one of the important power. Why the Brahmins, or the so-called, the thinkers of a society, were even one step beyond the rulers. Ours is a very unique country where, the king was also guided by somebody more powerful than him. So here what we look at IDSA is actually a think tank, where the knowledge of power is there, but here he speaks something about an individual power of thinking called Anvikshiki. So if you were able to develop this strategic thinking at an individual level, that itself is power. The king may have most powerful counselors or ministers, but if he's not able to take the decision at the right time, at the right place, I think, so that's the most brilliant concept that comes in the power of thinking, the power of strategic thinking called Anvikshiki. But what is very important is that even a strategic thinking should have a philosophical base. That's why, dharmic thinking comes in. And one thing which we always talk about is the biggest challenge for a king in our shastras is dharma sankat. You may be the best warrior in the world. So if you look at Bhagavad Gita, you have Arjuna, the most powerful warrior of that particular time, equipped with the best thing, including the best advisor. But the fact is that right in front of the challenge he collapses. And then Krishna comes in and gives him an advice. So, having the all powers, including the best of the machines and the weapons, may not be enough. So the man behind the machine, with his thinking sharpened to defeat the enemy, is Anvikshiki. So that's one part. The second one is Utsaha Shakti, the personal energy and the drive. Now if you talk about today, the modern research also, it's talk about leaders becoming role models and those who walk the talk or lead by example. I think finally it's all about the person on the top, Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. And Arthasastra talks about it. The ability to be an inspiration comes by developing personal excellences. So how do you become a role model? It's walk the talk, lead by example. The Chanakya gives you a process. Book 6, chapter number 1, sutra number 3. He says you become a role model by having these personal excellences like dynamism, piousness, truthful in speech, not breaking promise, having humility, being liberal and desirous of training. So you become an excellent person when you develop these particular qualities. Again, each of them can be a subject by itself. I'm not going to focus on that. But by actually developing these qualities in you, you become a role model to others. For example, taking one point, desirous of training. A leader of an organization say, all of you should be, focusing on training, but he himself doesn't focus on the training. So, institutions like this where you also get trained from time to time. Even in the corporate world that I work very closely with, I find role models are the people who don't just give budgets for training, but themselves attend, executive development programs or management development programs or leadership development programs. Next one is Prabhava Shakti, the power of the army and the treasury. There is this concept of the Saptanga, the 7 Prakriti, Swami, Amatya, Janapada, Durga, Kosha, Danda, Mitra. So this is like a model of a kingdom. Again, all of you know about it. It's been talked about. But if I were to pick up which are the 2 which makes the king the most powerful, he focuses on 2. On the Swami, Amatya, Janapada, Durga, Kosha, Danda, he says focus on these 2. One is the army and the treasury. Both are interconnected. So having these 2 under your control makes you the most powerful. The king brings under his sway, Arthasastra talks about it, his own party as well as the party of the enemies by the use of the army and the treasury. Now look at it, you can actually meditate on each of the words. The king brings under his sway his own party. You have to control your own people, you need to pay them well. One of the discussion that we have in the Mahabharata is that in spite of being on the wrong side, why did Bhishma and Drona and everybody support Duryodhana? And one of the things which many people have not really focused on qualities of Duryodhana was that he was a fantastic paymaster. His understanding about treasury was brilliant. If you look at in India, 1960s, brain drain. I mean, they also had a lot of patriotic instincts, but finally pay mattered, Arthasastra. So the king controls not only his party, but the party of the enemies. How do you take those guys on your side? Pay them. Then it can be on that side. So that's how he says the control of the army and the treasury. So that's power, that is Prabhava Shakti. Next is Mithra Shakti, the power of counsel and diplomacy. Again, Kautliya also suggests that the king to have the concept called Vriddha Darshi or Vriddha Sanyogaha. See, you may be powerful, but don't think alone. Have the think tank along with you. So Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was not alone. He had Ashtadhyaksha. Or say Akbar had Navaratna. So every king is as powerful as his counselors are. And what's very important is Chanakya talks about two important words. One is called opinion and the second is advice. Listen to the opinion of everybody, but take the advice from the best. Advice can make you or break you. Opinions are given by everybody. So this is saying, be careful from whom you take the advice. This is our advice. So the advisors make or break, because that's Mithra Shakti. So how do you gather this particular quality of thinking intelligent Anvikshiki is Vriddha Sanyoga? You can learn from people who are better than you. So in all my seminars, I tell this very loosely, but very profound understanding. Saying that दुनिया में तीन तरीके के लोग होते हैं. The three types of people. जो गलतियाँ करके सीखते हैं. दूसरे, they learn by doing the mistake. The second is गलतियाँ करते हैं फिर भी नहीं सीखते हैं. They keep reinventing the wheel. The third is दूसरों की गलतियों से सीखते हैं. Learn from others' mistakes. So there is a retired, let's say, person. Sit with him. He will give you tea, coffee, time, and advice free. But imagine about this. Vriddha Sanyoga is such a powerful concept. If you actually look at Arthasastra, what we are actually debating and discussing over here is actually Vriddha Sanyoga, right? So we are trying to say, we can learn the best of the strategies which has already been thought about by our forefathers centuries ago. It could be in Tirukural or Tulsidas Ramayana or, many of the texts that we have, the Kabir Ka Doha. But that's exactly why should we reinvent the wheel. So that's Mithra Shakti. Next one is Mithra Shakti. Now, as I told you, there is no word. Now, this is my contribution. A king is not powerful as powerful he is, but the kind of an allies he has got. So they say if you have a bigger enemy, the question to ask is not how to defeat the bigger enemy, but the question to ask is how many friends do you have? So I may be small, he may be big, but I got smarter and bigger friends with me. If you look at World War I, World War II, it's not about two countries, it's a group of allies. Like in war, the game changer is the key question, who is the ally on my side? This concept is the basis of the foreign policies and each country goes through even today, So your allying model, that is. The concept of Mithra comes in the Saptanga, where it is a Prakriti, element of a state. Swami Amatya Janapada Durga Kosha Danda, all these are within. But he says if you want to be progressive, if you want to be powerful, you need to have a lot of Mithras on your side. Enemy's enemy is a friend, right? But then it doesn't stop there. Again, the models you have seen, if you look at all the mandala theory, it goes beyond not just the enemy, but the Udasina also. He is not a friend, but he has to be factored in. He will not say neither this side nor that side, but he's an element, factor in him. Tomorrow he can get influenced by the kosha. So that factor that who is on your side, who is not on your side, that's one of the Shaktis. And this is my final one. Now this is an interesting thing, it's Guru Shakti. It is not described in the Arthashastra because as every scholar says, then Arthashastra doesn't talk about the moksha, the spiritual world. So it's only dharma, artha, kama. And one of the important things is that if you think too much about spirituality, you'll not be able to run this kingdom successfully. Okay, that's one dimension of a look at it, but if you have to understand Arthashastra, you need to understand Arthashastra through the life of Chanakya. So as Einstein put it so nicely, if you want to solve a problem, look at it from a different perspective. So when I started studying Arthashastra, different reading commentaries, if you look at the life of Chanakya itself, you understand this is a very important Shakti. And this Shakti cannot be taken for granted. What is Guru Shakti? Even though there is not such direct concept in the Arthashastra, we find the life of Chandragupta being led by this power. So Chandragupta, great king, but the fact is that he was guided by Chanakya himself who had a spiritual basis. If you look at Shivaji Maharaj, great king, but what we forget is that Ramdas Maharaj who inspired him. And I think in our country, the most important powerful person is not the king, but the person who makes him the king, right? So today also we have the king maker. So we cannot underestimate that power in the creation of a nation or a state. His own guru Chanakya was his biggest powerhouse. The power of a spiritual guru through his guidance leads a person to be worldly as well as spiritually successful. How do you get this? Look at Chanakya Niti while you are studying the Arthashastra. Many people say Chanakya Niti is a very different work, etc., etc. I don't have the exact Sanskrit quotation, but it says like this, that for the sake of a village, the person should leave his family. For the sake of a country, the person should leave the village also. And for the sake of the other world, he should leave the country also. So finally our kings have said, you have done your work, now go to sannyas. The 4 ashramas, don't stick to power, we should retire. But don't just retire, give your advice. Therefore, after Grahastha ashrama, there is one particular place before you become sannyas is called Vanaprasthan, that's what we are all doing. Be a think tank, guide the next generation, and when you're sure that the society is right, retire. That's the spiritual process. So I would like to wind up actually with a small story. Again, I talk more traditional as well as academic, so this doesn't have any particular academic reference, but it's interesting to actually understand this Guru Shakti. So there is a traditional story that, after Chandragupta was created, India was a great country, economic prosperity, good governance, etc. So some students from Greece came to India. Interestingly, we went to Greece just last month, where we represented India in the World Philosophy of Congress. You'd be surprised, post Alexander, all the Socrates, Plato, India and Greece have actually interacted a lot in philosophy. So the traditional story goes, a lot of students had heard about, in the colleges and universities, oh, there is a great country called India. So they came on a field visit. So as they were coming, they were seeing people all happy, everything was good. So I asked a common man in the market, saying that what exactly is the reason for this happiness? Praja sukhe sukham rajya. Saying that it is because of the Raja, Rajna. So can we meet him? Of course. He is having an open door policy. So they go meet him, and that's Chandragupta Maurya. Then they ask him, what's the reason for him to be what's the reason for all the happiness? People say, you are the reason for the happiness. He said, I'm not the reason for happiness. I have good governance because it is guided by my guru. He is the one who runs the kingdom. So can we meet him? Oh, open door policy, go. They go and meet Chanakya in the ashram, and then they meet him and saying that people are happy because the king is having good governance. But king says he doesn't run the kingdom, you run the kingdom. So tell us the secrets of how do you run the kingdom? And he says in a very beautiful way, who says I run the kingdom? It is dharma that runs the kingdom. And the duty of a guru is to show the king what is dharma. So I am the link between dharma and the governance. And he says also, see, dharma here doesn't mean only loosely translated religion. Saying that there are certain natural laws of nature. And we, the so-called gurus, are always talking about the natural laws. And as long as your governance is in those natural lines, you're a great king. And therefore, I like to wind up by telling that in the Arthasastra, the concept of a praja is not just human beings. When we say praja, it means human beings. It also means you're a king of the fishes and the birds and the plants and the animals. So if you look at Arthashastra, there are actually animal rights being talked about. You're talking about environmental protection, so which today the world is talking about, and say, when I'm a king, I can't make the vote bank my most important activity. But what about the carbon credits that the world is talking about? So praja has to be broadly understood from the total society, the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknown, and the other spiritual world also. That's it. Thank you so much. But just want to tell you, many of you may be aware of my book. I've tried to reinterpret and reconstruct Arthashastra in the book called Corporate Chanakya. But the interesting thing is that there's a next book also coming up, which is on the Saptanga model, to be released in a month's time, called Chanakya's 7 Secrets of Leadership. I've tried my best. We at the university, madam, we are trying our best to not only talk and take out concept, but trying to reconstruct for our generation. Thank you so much.